Welcome to the Two Dumbass Wood Shop. In this episode, we're going to be using Rockler's 3-track cribbage board to make a cribbage board. And as you see, I've got a piece of wood here sitting in front of me, and this is really a beautiful piece of oak with some great grains, except unfortunately it's got a bunch of holes in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this wood and shine it all up, sand it, etc., and then we are going to put an epoxy over it and make cribbage boards out of it. So follow along as I go through this.
Desperado, sitting in a old Monte Carlo, a man inside his hollow.
I'm going to probably keep, as of right now, this side on the upside for my cribbage board. Now, I've got some roughness on here, and it's got some really cool grooves. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to use my drum sander to really take out some of these rough spots and save myself some time. So that's our next step. I just thought I'd show you what it looks like to begin with until we're done with the sanding. Almost finished sanded. I've got this down to 220 grit. I'm going to do 400 grit one more time, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet this down as in my previous video. I like to wet this down 2-3 times just to bring this out. Now I know I'm going to put epoxy, 2-part epoxy on here, so I'm probably only going to wet this down once and then sand it. And the only reason I'm doing that is the finer I make this, the more these grains are going to pop once I get that epoxy on it. The other key thing is hey, whatever you're going to do, make sure you get it done before you put this epoxy, because there's no going back after that. So I've got a couple other little things I'm going to do. I'm going to put my logo right here, and then also I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do from a solution perspective for my pegs. So stay tuned for that. So this is just a seal coat that we're putting on here. I mixed the 2-part epoxy from Stone for about 7 minutes. Called for 5. I've had experiences to where it wasn't properly mixed and then it doesn't fully cure right, and so I think it's just best to make sure it's all properly mixed. This is high temp Stone coat. No reason for this to be high temp, but given that's what I have on hand, that's what I'm using. We're just again putting on a thin coat. And the main premise on this is hey, we're sealing the wood. It's basically what we're doing. So I'm going to have some leftover epoxy. And always good to have a couple of projects that you want to get done with your epoxy, so you can use that up. I happen to have a table, a workshop table, that whenever I have extra, I just pour it on there and let it cure. The next thing is you really want to keep these bubbles at bay. We'll do this a couple of times until this starts to set up, and then we're good. Well, we're done with our initial seal coat, at least from a top perspective. On the back, I have yet to do this. I've put my brand in here, and so I'm going to do another seal coat here, but also what I'm doing is I'm building a frame, and so I'm going to basically encapsulate this cribbage board, and then I'm going to use a wax paper so that I can remove this cleanly and it doesn't stick to this wood. So that's what I'm doing next. Another important point is when you build your frame around it, you want to leave a little bit of a lip so that you have plenty of you have plenty of space for that liquid to come up to. And I'm going to try something a little different. I've left myself quite a little bit of a lip. And what I'm going to do is I think what I'm going to do, I haven't decided for sure, is I'm going to put this up just a little higher and air nail it in just with a couple simple nails. So I leave myself some gap on the bottom side. And then when I come to pull this frame out, after I have it lined with wax paper, what I'll do is I'll just pull that out and fill those holes with that epoxy and nobody will ever know. All right, so I've got my frame built. I've caulked all the way around the seams. I think it was an unnecessary step for what I'm going to be using here. I'm going to be using some Tyvek material. And what I'm going to do is basically have it kind of overlap the edges and then fold it down inside. So that's my plan as of this far. I've also cut a hole here in the middle that I believe, this is going to work, so that once I have my frame in here and I've got everything epoxied, this is how I will get the board out of the frame. So we'll have to see how this works, but this is what I'm doing. And per our previous comments, I decided not to split in between. I decided to make it flush for the bottom, and I'll just paint the bottom and I can get a really nice coat on it. So that's my plan. We'll see how this works. All right, so what I was going to do is I was going to try to cut this and get this all wrapped perfect around my frame, but I've got such a nice fit here. I tried just press fitting this in and it fits perfect. So a couple little things here is that I might have some cracks on my form, etc. So I might have a little sanding I'm going to have to do here in these corners. But the beautiful thing about this two-part epoxy is that you can sand it, and then I will just hand brush over the top of it to make it look perfect. So I think this is going to work. Well, I just finished my second coat, and my second coat was I'm still filling in from a light seal coat. I've now started to put my beginning layer in here for my filling in this gap, and I also put some in here as well. So I try to do probably no more than 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch at a time. So I'm probably going to do 3 or 4 coats on this to fill this all up. A little note that I tried, I've been looking for some glitter to try to fill this in, and so I did have an experiment, and I'm hoping this is going to turn out. I used fingernail polish. It's got a little bit of a glitter in it. I can see it's somewhat separated. I started to mix it in with the epoxy, but to try to give it a little depth and texture. So we'll see how that plays out. I do have some glitter that I bought, but I'm giving this a shot, and it seems to be hardening with it already. So we'll see how this plays out, and be a nice little test. All right, so quite a bit of time's passed since I've filmed this. I've gotten busy. I actually have quite a few coats of two-part epoxy on here. My next step is I'm going to start to drill this and place this where this is at. So the dimensions for this mini jig, 16 1/4 by 5 1/2. I easily have the 5 1/2 because I mean at my narrowest point I'm at 9 inches. However, when you look at my distance, I'm at just under 19 inches. And what I want to do is I'm trying to avoid this little spot here. So I'm trying to place that so that I have minimal drilling into that really pretty piece of wood. So that's what I'm doing next, and then what we'll start to do is go ahead and drill these holes. Now, one thing here on this jig right here, these set of 3 holes by 10 really are set up for keeping track of wins and losses. So I can, in my thoughts, I can place that anywhere I want. So I am going to drill my index holes somewhere, and I'm going to drill those later. And I'm going to place them on the board in a separate spot and not follow the jig per se. So that's where we're at in this. So I've completed my first set of holes. I've got a couple things going on I haven't figured out yet. So one is my holes appear to be at a slant. So I've got to figure out why that is. I think I know because I have my table that I'm sawing on off so that are not level. So I'm going to go fix that. The other thing that's going on is you see all the white from drilling through the two-part epoxy. I have a couple ideas that I'm going to do. Okay, so we're now on to our next spot, and so as you see on this jig, I have to repeat these sections. So what you do is we had these two index pins that we put in first. What we're going to now do is on the last pin where we had that, we put those pins in the repeat section. We'll come through and redrill these two holes, which are your indexing pins. And what we're going to do is once we do that, we'll move these to these points, and then we'll repeat this 5 more times before we come back around to finish this off. Well, I'm wrapping up this episode. I finally got this board done. I think it turned out pretty good. There's a couple little things I want to share with you. As I started to two-part epoxy this, I kept chasing between the bottom and the top. I think if I was going to do this project again, one of the things I would do is I wouldn't do the bottom at all. It really doesn't add a lot of value to the board. You're never going to look at it, so I think that would eliminate a lot of my problems. The other piece is, as I started to drill this all out, I think the board turned out really great. These holes started to fill up with some of the resin from the two-part epoxy as I drilled. And so I started using a dental pick to pull this out. And I used my phone-a-friend Joel to seek some advice as well, and one of the things he suggested was using alcohol, with a swab, and try to get that out. And what I chose to do, alcohol was going to be my second option. I chose to use high pressure water. Our sink has a nozzle to where it has like a pinhole to where it puts a lot of pressure in, and I use that to clean out all these holes. I initially started with with a barbecue bottle with a pointy top, and I was squirting that in, and I finally resorted to the sink, and that worked out great. I'm super duper happy with this. I'm about just to the best that I can do. The one thing I'll test in the future is putting poly on here. My daughter arrives tomorrow, so I want to get this done. Lastly, I chiseled out a hole here to hold and this is pretty strong, to hold all of her picks or pins for the cribbage board. And what I'm going to do is use this hole to screw in with a Teflon washer, and I'm going to put a metal plate on here so she can just slide that open, pull out the pins, put them back in, and you could always tighten that back up. And if that ever gets loose, we'll just put in a bigger screw, but this should easily work, and I think it was a good option. So with that, we'll close this episode. I hope this was helpful. Drop me a line if you thought it was helpful, or if you got any questions. And that's from the Two Dumbass Workshop. And if you like what we do, give us a subscribe. Thanks so much.